The following broadcast is brought to you by Public House Media.
Everybody, fantasy football players hopefully all across the world someday. Scott Wisniewski, Robert Gardner, it's Fantasy Wizards. You're on Public House Media. Hopefully you had a better week than Carson Palmer did. Hopefully you had a better week than some of the other quarterbacks in football, because it was a bad week, I think, for quarterbacks in general. How was your week? How was your weekend, Robert?
You know, it was pretty good. Went into the Monday night game needing 30 points to win, and
Carson Wentz actually. I lost out by not starting Carson Wentz. I started Mariota instead, who got 5 points. Wentz got 26, and I lost by 10 points. So rough one, because I'm in a dogfight. I'm 5-2, and I'm actually not in first place in my division. So it was a tough loss, but maybe I'll bounce back this week.
Those ones are the toughest.
Absolutely. So let's get into it. You know, we saw some injuries. Again, nothing like an Aaron Rodgers injury, but a quarterback who is a starter, who is a top 10 fantasy quarterback, Carson Palmer, out for essentially the rest of the fantasy football season, as he's likely to miss 8 weeks. That at least takes him through the end of the regular season. As it happens now, you're going to have to go find somebody. But talk a little bit about the impact of that, and then also whether or not Stanton is somebody you would even consider picking up as a potential replacement.
Really tough. Carson Palmer meant a lot to that offense. It's going to be hard to replace him with a Drew Stanton, who's been in the offense for. I just don't have confidence. Wasn't on. The offensive line isn't blocking well. That's not a great situation for a backup quarterback successful. I just don't see it happening.
Yeah, me either. And I think the trickle-down effect isn't just, you lose your quarterback and do you want to go out and pick up his natural backup. The other thing is, what does it do for a guy like Larry Fitzgerald, who even on the other end of 30 had a really great rapport with Carson Palmer, and now obviously I think he's diminished as well.
Oh, absolutely, his value's gone down. I mean, Palmer and on the field, Larry Fitzgerald, great route runner. So there's still going to be some value regardless of Carson Palmer. Larry Fitzgerald is going to be the primary target in that offense, and honestly, you could see more targets to Larry Fitzgerald just from a comfort. I mean, who else?
Well, sure. I mean, Brown. I've never trusted John Brown. J.J. Nelson's a piece, but he's not necessarily a guy that I would count on to be somebody who's going to be a top receiver. So. Yeah, there's definitely going to be some issues trying to replace that tandem, and maybe they'll rely more on Adrian Peterson to see if he can regain what he did a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I mean, he's got a great opportunity to, but offensive line performed this past weekend. Hard to see that, knowing that you no longer have to necessarily worry about defense is focusing on that run game, and they're going to shut down Adrian Peterson, and they're going to make Drew Stanton have to beat you. So,
yeah, absolutely. Another quarterback, maybe not as good as Carson Palmer, Jay Cutler got injured. I've said for years, and maybe you feel the same way, or at least believe that Moore is one of the better backup quarterbacks in football, and now he's going to get a chance perhaps to start it. And if Cutler does play, fine, but I still think Moore. I was surprised that Miami went out and got Cutler in the first place, because I thought it was Matt Moore's chance to actually get a starting gig in Miami.
I agree with you. I think the Miami Dolphins missed an opportunity when they brought in Cutler to really, because obviously you've got, but is he really that firmly planted as the starter in that offense? Of course not. I mean, Matt, this was their chance to see kind of neglect. Let's see what Matt Moore does. He has weapons around him. It would be interesting if your backups to pick a Drew Stanton or have to go with Matt Moore. I think the upside's so much higher with Matt Moore.
Agreed. Let's shift gears here and talk about our weekly segment here. Miracle or Mirage? Some interesting names, some guys who had some big weeks. We're going to start with a quarterback for the New York Jets. Josh McCown, looking good again consistently all year, has been a guy who seems to throw a couple touchdowns a week, gets near the 300-yard range, hasn't turned the ball over a ton. Is this a guy that you think is going to continue to at least be a top 12, top 15 fantasy quarterback this year?
Read on Josh McCown, I think week to week, he's been consistent. He's playing some of the best football he's played his entire career. The problem I have with him is there's just no talent around, no true talent around him that makes me say he's going to put up big numbers week to week.
Yeah, I think Kurse is really a number 2 at best, and he's being asked to be the number 1 guy, unless, I'll shift gears a little bit, you believe in Robbie Anderson.
You see, I just don't. I really don't. Not yet. Not yet. He needs to show me some more. He's a little too far now. He's not getting the consistent targets in the game. He's a guy who can develop, but
sure.
Are you there, Scott?
I am. Sorry. I have some connection issues here, as I think I may be able to switch over here in like maybe a minute or two to my actual new computer, which for some reason decided to have updates today. So I'm having a little bit of in and out on the audio, but it looks like we might be getting that fixed here within the next minute. I'll throw out another name while we do, and I'm certainly not thinking he's more than a mirage, but he's popped up a couple of times this week. Austin Eckler, backup running back for the Chargers.
The Eckler, the more I like what he's doing. Those reps over Brandon Oliver, I think it's pretty safe to say he's supplanted Oliver as the number 2 back there in San Diego Gordon. And he's especially in deeper leagues and leagues where you have where you might be limited with your flex. He's a potential great option for you.
It will be interesting to see how the rep, especially like you mentioned, if Gordon's banged up, he seems like he's getting those carries. Kenny Stills had a big week, and especially after Cutler got hurt. Now, Devontae Parker's been hurt. Jarvis Landry is a good receiver there, but Kenny Stills got some love last week.
Yeah, Kenny Stills, big performance, really impressive. It was nice to see him have a bit of a breakout game this year. But at the same time, I'm not sure how much I can trust him, because as Matt Moore gets more reps with that first-team offense, he's going to start to find Jarvis Landry, and though is going to go through who that quarterback is.
Sure. Another guy who, seems to be – now, I watched the Packer game. We'll talk more about the Packers later. And I've been of the belief that Drew Brees doesn't have the arm he used to have. So he's been throwing the ball a little bit shorter, letting his guys run. I think that's hurt Michael Thomas, which we'll talk about in a bit. But it seems to have helped Ted Ginn Jr. Because they still are a team that likes to throw first. Your thoughts on Ted Ginn for the remainder of the season?
I like Ginn as long as Willie Snead is dinged up, honestly, in that offense. I think the second Ginn becomes less of a component on the offense. But the fact that the Saints are running the ball and moving the ball on the ground helps all of their receivers get open down the field.
Sure.
Some opportunities, the more efficient side of the ball with the run game.
Hey, you know what? A guy who kind of highly drafted tight end, O.J. Howard, catching 2 touchdowns at the expense of Cameron Brate owners who were finally starting to believe in the legitimacy of Cameron Brate. But O.J. Howard looked really good last week.
Fantastic. The problem is it seems to be an outlier when you look far this season. I'm not ready to go all in on him yet. The hands, I think he's got the potential to become a focal point for that offense. But as it stands right now, Brate's getting the targets. He's going to continue to be that third down option. And when they get into the red zone, Brate and Mike Evans are the two Carson's going to look Howard. So that's right now.
Sure. Hey, and one more for this segment. Juju Smith-Schuster. It's a fun name to say. Is he a guy that you are picking up to be, especially with some of the heavier bye weeks coming up, as a guy that might be a flex player for you?
Absolutely. I actually picked Juju up last week, prior to last week's action, and he performed nicely for me. He picked up a touchdown, good yardage, great option considering Stephon Diggs was a late move after the Thursday night game, so that kind of hurt and sent me into Hannah. Juju performed well for me, so I think he can be weak, especially because he's should be going to Martavius Bryant.
Yeah, absolutely. Here, let's move on to some burning questions in this segment. We talked about him at the top of the show. He won you a game. He cost me a game because I didn't play him. Is Carson Wentz the midseason fantasy football MVP?
I can crown him fantasy football MVP left. There's a lot left to play. But as a Carson Wentz owner, very, very pleased with the production so far. And the way that team has been playing and the way that they've established the ground game, I think it's going to continue. And maybe by the end of the year, he will be our fantasy MVP.
Well, and you know what's funny is where I got him, where I have him and in my bigger league, he was my second quarterback behind Marcus Mariota. And he was a guy I got very, very late. So if nothing else, for the value where I think Carson Wentz was picked, he certainly has outshined that. Hey, here's an interesting question. Which Packer has more fantasy value the rest of the season? Aaron Jones or Jordy Nelson?
I think it has to be Aaron Jones. I mean, I just don't have much faith in the quarterback situation there, and the Packers are going to have to run the ball if they're going to take in, and that just screams Aaron Jones chewing up yardage and scoring me some fantasy points.
Yeah, I think you're right. And it's funny because there was a lot of flack around these parts about Coach McCarthy not throwing the ball more. But to be quite honest, Aaron Jones ran the ball well, and Brent Hundley didn't throw it so well. So maybe the game plan wasn't the problem. You know, I suffered from a late scratch by Leonard Fournette, but a lot of people scrambled to pick up Chris Ivory thinking he was going to be the play. He did score a touchdown, but TJ Yeldon had the bigger game. More value going forward as Fournette's backup. TJ Yeldon or Chris Ivory?
So I think he's got a better burst coming out of the backfield. I think his running style similar in ways to Leonard Fournette, maybe not as physicality, but still in between the tackles can be. I think he's a great option while Fournette is sidelined or dinged up. He's going to be your better option week to week than I think Ivory will be.
If we have the right answer to this next question, we could probably go to Vegas and win some money. Who will eventually be the Seattle Seahawks running back to own?
None of them. Not one of them.
That's fair. That's fair.
No idea, and it is awful.
Yeah, it's not a committee because there's a bunch of good ones. It's a committee because there's really nobody there that I would trust. So here's another one, and I'm switching. Hang on one second here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Over. I finally got my updates installed. Yay! This is much better because now the audio is not cutting out. Is it me, and maybe I'm just being overly critical because I watched a lot of Red Zone last Sunday? Is quarterback play as a whole, not individually, but as a whole, declining across the NFL, and more importantly for this show, in fantasy football?
I think, I'm not sure I would call it the declining level of play, but I think as the NFL has integrated some of these younger quarterbacks who've come from these spread systems in college, in some of those spread concepts, integrate them into the NFL offenses. What we're seeing is how athletic have become, and realizing and taking advantage of some of the less complex systems that are being introduced on offense. That's helping the defense play better, and it's making some of the quarterback play look a little worse than maybe it actually is.
Sure. That's fair. Hey, this is more of a hypothetical, but you can answer it anyway. And maybe I'm just bitter because I started the wrong quarterback. Did Marcus Mariota start his bye week a week too early?
I think he did, absolutely. I think Mariota might be a little more injured than people are letting on, and he looked like he just took that day off this weekend. Get his vacation started. But
so we won't get into too many topics that aren't germane to fantasy football. The Marshawn Lynch foolish penalty last week, and it cost him a foul. He's appealing it. I don't know what grounds he has to appeal. However, which Oakland running back would you start this week? Washington or Richard?
It's because I think Richard is a better option for that offense schematically, but Washington's going to be the running down in the red zone. So it's honestly a toss-up. I guess it's going to have to be decided by how your scoring format works. If you've got a custom scoring league where carries and yards really matter over the bonus touchdown, maybe you leave traditional scoring formats. I think Washington might be your better option because of his goal line carries.
So originally, the way I worded this question, I'm just going to change it up. We know that people want to be the quarterback of the Cleveland Browns just because it's an NFL gig, although you wouldn't know it by watching this triumvirate of stink that we've seen. However, let me ask you a better question. Did the Browns make a mistake not drafting a quarterback with their first pick?
The Browns are a mess. I don't even know if they know what they're doing anymore. I don't think they necessarily knew what they were doing to start with. It's not. I think the thinking is there, but the execution is not, and that's been the development of any quarterback in that locker room.
So here's a couple of quick hitters. As we talk about keep them or kick them, some big names on here. How about Mike Thomas? A guy who, again, we talked about Drew Brees and his maybe arm strength. Is he a guy that you would look to trade if you could?
Mike Thomas is definitely a guy I think I would look to trade right now if the value's right. At the same time, though, if you want in return, look at what the Saints are doing. They're a little more committed to the running game. That's going to open, I think, as the season progresses. And that hope and that gut feeling that I have makes me want to hold on to Thomas just a couple weeks longer.
This one's a little bit of a no-brainer just because of some of the problems he's having with his own team. Martavius Bryant, at least in Pittsburgh, I think it's time to kick him, right?
Absolutely. I mean, he's so talented and he can be productive, but right now he just doesn't have it, and he's clashing with the coaching staff, the other players on the team. It's just not a good situation. There's no way he's a good option the rest of the year. Him up, he's not a player that's going to just integrate into that offense.
Yeah, no, I agree. Three more, and then we'll call it a night here. And I do apologize for some of my early technical difficulties. Again, new technology, upgrading Windows, updating Windows, great. Microsoft owns us, and there's nothing we can do about it. Rob Kelly. I said this at the beginning of the year when I thought Perrine was going to be a guy that could steal that job, and people said, well, they have Rob Kelly. And I said, yeah, exactly. They have Rob Kelly. Rob Kelly, not even really the most valuable back there. It isn't Perrine either. It seems to be Thompson because he's a dual threat. But do you look to deal, release, or do something different with Rob Kelly?
I think with Rob Kelly, it's time to cut bait and run. Chris Thompson's established himself as the primary back in that offense. And I think, if anything, they're going to want to lean on that rookie to see what they have there rather than keep going with Rob Kelly. Continues to diminish.
Agreed. Two last ones, and they're both quarterbacks, and they're both on the opposite ends of the spectrum if you look at where they were last year. Andy Dalton, he was definitely a kick in the first couple weeks. Then he looked a little bit more like Andy Dalton of old. For the last 2 weeks, he's back, or last 2 games, I should say, he's back to being the Andy Dalton from early in the season. They're trying to establish a running game with this 3-headed monster. Is this somebody you'd look to replace?
I mean, you just can't trust Andy Dalton. I mean, he too streaky. You can trust what AJ, but they don't know what they're doing on. They don't know who their running back is, and Andy Dalton has been playing terrible. Plus, he lost probably his biggest safety valve in their tight end. So, yeah. I mean, it's just not a good situation. Time to cut and run.
Yeah, you're right. With Eifert gone, they really struggled. All right, we got one more before we do that. Robert Gardner, Scott Wisniewski, Public House Media's Fantasy Wizards, our Tuesday night edition. We'll have a Thursday night edition coming up here, obviously, in about 48 hours. We're going to end on this note. A guy who was, touted as the next great longtime MVP quarterback. This was the week, man. He was playing the Patriots. Terrible defense. Matt Ryan threw 1 touchdown against the Patriots. Are you trying to deal him?
Listen, I don't. It's Matt Ryan has weapons. He's talented. But clearly, Kyle Shanahan meant more to that than I think we realized at the start of the season, because this is not the same offense we saw last year. They are completely out of sync, and it makes me worry long-term about what production for Matt Ryan's going to look like, because there's a lot of people in it.
Sure. Well, the flip side of that is maybe eventually, not this year, San Francisco will be back to being a winner, because maybe Shanahan's got that magic bullet. Who knows? But not this year. This year, I'm still staying away from guys like C.J. Beathard and whatever else they got going on in San Francisco. All right. Well, we made it, technology issues and all, and I appreciate your patience, Robert, and everybody who was tuning in as we tried to get booted. Started a little bit late, but another action-packed half hour. I know I could talk for another 2 hours about guys that are just driving people nuts. Next week, I actually have some people who wanted to start sending in some questions, and I think we'll start fielding some questions from the audience, and I think that would be great, but I don't think we'll ever be short of topics, my friend.
Absolutely. Looking forward to the questions. Can't wait.
All right. Robert Gardner, Scott Wisniewski, Public House Media, bringing you another edition of Fantasy Wizards. We'll see everybody on Thursday.